for, this is in year 2014, so for year 2014 and for 2017, like year 4. And then give me the book value for each of those 2 years. And let's see what answers you get. Of course, you're going to have to do the whole thing, the whole steps, to get to 2017. Otherwise, it's kind of impossible to do that. So remember what you try to go back to your notes and review. Remember, what do we do? At least I would start with year 0 and have a, what's your opening book value? How much should you list the asset on your books? I'm not going to hardly get started yet, but I do want to make sure you're on the right track. What are you going to start here? What should your opening cost of your asset be?
15,000.
15?
Did you have 1350?
Yeah, 13.5. Because what did you actually pay for your asset? And you never really paid 15,000. When you get a rebate, that's money coming back. Kind of like a purchase discount when you take the price off the inventory. So the equipment on my books is only going to be starting out at 13.5. One of the other key things, two key things to remember: what do you do with salvage value on this method, and what are you going to use here for the double the straight line percent? So we'll go over these answers in about 3 minutes. Give you time to get started. We'll see how you do. Try to fill in the answers here like it would be for the test. Sarah, what'd you get for year 1 depreciation?
I don't know, I'm kind of stuck.
You didn't get anything?
No.
Did you get anything, Brandon?
No, not yet.
What'd you get?
Depreciation on the double decline would be 5,400.
5,400, yes, very good. 5,400. Remember, you take double the straight line, and salvage value isn't used yet. So double straight line, this is a 5-year asset, just like the one that we had in our example. So it happens to use the same percentage. Not all of them do. Straight line would be, we use the asset for 1 out of 5 years. So that's 20%. But with this being double, we're going to double it to 40%. So remember how I do that. To get this number, you multiply 13.5, the old book value, the most previous one, times 40%. And the book value should be easy to get now, subtracting the two, your 2 assets. So for this one, you would have obviously written 5,400, book value of 8,100 for your two answers if it was on the test like this.
So you only use the double declining when it's a piece of equipment you're using daily and it's wearing more, or is it?
Yeah, it wears more, and you use it a whole lot right up front. And then the first 2 years, you use it a whole bunch because it's brand new and it does the best.
Mhm.
But then 2 or 3 years later, you only use it sparingly because you got newer equipment. And you just use the old stuff not very much. So the depreciation shows that I'm using it a whole lot less every year. And remember, this is where the salvage value comes into play. The salvage value can't go below, the book value can't go below the salvage value.
So that's the lowest price it could possibly go, because it's there, it can't.
Yeah, I can't depreciate it anymore. So year 5, even though it's a 5-year asset, I don't depreciate it any. Because I've already hit the lowest I can go. Every year I did 40%, except I didn't do 40% to get this number. If you take 2916 and times it by 40%, it's not 316, because I only have 316 left. When I go between these two, this is only $316 left. And that's all the more I can take it. So in my little problem, these two would have been the answers I would have been looking for, along with this and this. Could you have given me those 4 answers for this particular problem? Okay, so we talked about straight line percentage so far. That's the easiest method, because once you get the amount, you don't change. You get one amount for year 1, and then it's the same for every other year up through year 5. Unless the only difference would be if you added like an engine to a car, like we did in some examples. And then you have to recalculate your depreciation based on the new price. And straight line would be very accurate for a business to use if they use their asset like a car and they use the same amount pretty much every year. That would be pretty easy to do straight line, and it makes sense. Double declining, as Brandon mentioned, you use the asset. You plan on using the asset a whole lot the first couple of years, and then significantly less the following years. It makes sense then, if you're going to use it a whole bunch, to expense a whole bunch of it to match with your revenues. The last method that a company can pick from, and you can pick any three, whatever one makes the most sense for your business, is the units of production. And this one, the key thing is, it does not involve years. You don't make an estimated life, say 5 years. You make an estimated, how many items is this thing going to produce, or how many revolutions is it going to go through? However you want to judge that machine based on its work. Like with a vehicle, you would probably judge it on miles driven. Every mile would be a unit. Now, or other machines, it would be how many times does it have to actually go through its process of whatever it does, one cycle, or how many actual physical things come out of it if it makes the final product. So somebody has to be able to tell, and you may even be able to get this from the manufacturer's specs, and it says, we think that this item should make at least, for a car, 100,000 miles. Would be a good average, or 150,000 miles. And then you would use that, or modify it if you want to, as your total, what you're going to base everything on. If I'm going to have it for 150,000, and I use it for 15,000 miles, how much did I use the car this year? Well, yeah, but like what percent of the car's value?
15? No, I'm fine.
If I said 150,000 and I'm going to use it, and I used it 15 this year, how much of the car's value did I use?
10%.
10%. So I should depreciate 10%. And that's what we're going to do here. And I think it's easiest if you just break it down into 3 steps. First step is to find what am I actually going to use as my depreciational amount. Because with salvage value, your depreciation amount usually is less than your cost. So I call it the depreciation base, just for lack of a better term. This is what I'm going to use when I'm depreciating. I'm going to start with this number. Depreciation base is your cost, whatever you paid for it, minus your salvage value. Now cost could be book value if you bought something later in its life, sometime later, 2 or 3 years down the road, you need to recalculate some stuff. You may have to get a new depreciation base. But typically, you just get your depreciation base one time, and you use that number. Okay, so we just get this one time. One-time calculation, unless you bought something new and added to it, like an engine. Step 2, we're going to determine how much did I actually use? What percentage did I use the vehicle? That's pretty easy. Just take actual units. So miles would be, just look at the odometer. Or most other machines will have some kind of calculation on it where it tells you how many times it's been used. Actual miles, but if it's a car only. But actual units would be a better realistic term, more generalized. Actual units over your estimated total units. So like the 15,000 miles over the 150,000, that would give us the 10%. And then step 3 is just combining everything. Take what I'm using as my base number, times it by the percentage that I use the vehicle, 10%. That's how much my depreciation expense is. Pretty simple. I'm just going to put here step 1 times step 2. You can write that out differently if you want to, but just taking the answer for this one times the answer for this one gives you your depreciation base. The units production isn't hard either. Double declining is hard to say, it's not that tough. So let's practice this with this example here. I'm asking, I want you to actually provide the journal entry for both years. And then tell me the book value. Now, I don't ask you to provide the actual purchase, but let's just, for this sake, let's put the purchase down as well. What would the journal entry have been on July 1 of 2014? Yeah, why?
Because you add what it took to install and test the machine.
Good, yeah. Any cost that gets the item ready to use. And I need to have it installed and tested, so $164,000, just like if there was sales tax, I would add that in too. I just don't list it in here. And then however we paid for it, we could have paid for it with cash or on account. That part isn't, I'm not as worried about. It's this one that I wanted you to make sure you have. And then tell me, before you get started, what, if anything, does the date have to do with when I purchased it? Remember, for straight line, well, I used it for a half a year, so I couldn't use the whole amount that I determined for depreciation in year one. I had to cut it in half. What about this one?
Doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how many items did I make in year one? Now, obviously, I made less, and that makes sense because I didn't have it for the whole year. But however many units I made, that's what matters, not the date. So let's take about 2 or 3 minutes again, and then try to determine and do these 2 steps here, the journal entry and the book value after each year. And we'll see how you do. So just do the steps, 1, 2, and 3, and you should be able to do this. What was the depreciation expense for year one?
22.5.
Yeah, 22.5. I did the steps here. This is obviously step 1, getting my depreciation base. So I'm going to use 150,000 as my number to multiply against. And then I used approximately 15% of the asset. Well, how much I expect to use it, 15% of its total use when you take these divided by each other. Now I'm going to show you a slightly different way. If this way just doesn't quite make sense to me how this is happening, there is one little other way that you can do this, and don't even write it down if it doesn't make sense to you. See if it makes sense and then write it down if you want to. But step 1 on this other alternative method, the method I'm going to show you now is the one the book actually has as its method that it uses. This way makes more sense to me. For whatever reason, mentally, I can connect with this way. This other one, I can do it, it's just fine. It's just that it's not the first thing that pops in my head. I want to know on this method, I use the vehicle 10% of its life, then I can easily do the percentage. This one, the only difference is, with step 2, you want to determine what is your depreciation cost per 1 unit. if you just make one item, what's it gonna cost you? And what you do is you just take your depreciation base, so step 1, and divide it by your estimated total units. So in our case, with this example, it would have been 150,000 over 50,000. So for every item I produce, it costs me $3 in depreciation. So then step 3, actual units times step 2. Answer. So you take actual units, 7,500, times $3 a unit, 22.5. You're going to usually get the same answer. However, due to rounding, it could be a little different. But whatever way makes more sense to you, pick that way and do it. I hesitate to show you the second way, but since it's in the book, I do. Only because I've had people in the past kind of mix them up. Try to do a little bit of that one and a little bit of this one, and then you have a third method and it's not good. All right.